7 members, 1 group, a global empire worth billions. But what if the real reason BTS dominates K-pop has nothing to do with talent alone? What hidden sacrifices, rejected dreams, and near impossible odds did each member overcome before the world even knew their names? These are 7 verified facts most fans never think to question. Number 7. J-Hope. Before Jung Ho-seok became the human energy reactor the world calls J-Hope, he was a teenage street dancer in Gwangju, South Korea, a city far from the K-pop spotlight of Seoul. He was not training in some polished idol academy. He was grinding on concrete, battling in underground dance circles as a member of a street dance crew called Neuron. This was not a hobby. This was identity. And by 2008, when Ho-seok was only 14 years old, he had already placed first place in a national dance competition in South Korea. A kid from a city that most entertainment agencies would never scout from was already proving he could outmove dancers twice his age. That kind of raw dominance does not come from natural gift alone. It comes from relentless, obsessive repetition, the kind that leaves your knees bruised and your shoes wrecked. That was Ho-seok's childhood, not glamour, just grind. Big Hit Entertainment, back then a small, financially struggling agency run by Bang Si-hyuk, noticed Ho-seok and recruited him as a trainee around 2010. But here's the detail most people gloss over. Big Hit was not the company it is today. It had no proven track record in producing top idol groups. Joining Big Hit was not a golden ticket, it was a gamble. Ho-seok left Gwangju and moved to Seoul to train in a company that could have folded before ever debuting a single act. He bet his entire adolescence on a promise that had no guarantee. And then the situation got worse. During the trainee period, Ho-seok reportedly came dangerously close to being removed from the final BTS lineup. The group's original concept was shifting, the member roster was being restructured, and Ho-seok found himself on the edge of elimination. According to multiple accounts from BTS members themselves, it was RM, the group's leader, who stepped in and convinced Ho-seok to stay. Think about that for a second. The person who would eventually become the emotional backbone of BTS, the member whose energy literally holds the group's live performances together, almost never made it into the group at all. If one conversation had gone differently, the entire dynamic of BTS would have been altered beyond recognition. When Ho-seok survived that cut, he did not just remain a dancer, he evolved. Big Hit Entertainment required their trainees to be versatile, so Ho-seok taught himself to rap. He was not a natural rapper. He was a dancer who forced himself to develop a completely new skill set because the group needed it. And he did not just become passable, he became one of the most technically precise rappers in BTS, with a flow that is rhythmically complex and distinctly his own. Fast forward to March 2018, J-Hope released his solo mixtape called Hope World for free on streaming platforms. The project debuted at number 63 on the Billboard 200 chart, then climbed to number 38, making J-Hope the highest-charting solo Korean artist on the Billboard 200 at that time. Not the highest-charting K-pop group member, the highest-charting solo Korean artist, period. A street dancer from Gwangju did that, with a free mixtape. No traditional album rollout, no massive Western label push, just music and a fan base that recognized quality. Then in July 2022, J-Hope headlined Lollapalooza in Chicago, becoming the first South Korean artist to ever headline a major American music festival. Lollapalooza is not a niche event. It draws over 100,000 attendees per day. And there was Ho-seok, the kid who almost got cut from a small agency's trainee lineup, standing on that stage, commanding one of the biggest festival crowds in the United States. In April 2023, J-Hope enlisted in the South Korean military, fulfilling the mandatory service obligation required of all able-bodied Korean men. He completed his service and was discharged in October 2024. He did not seek exemption, he did not delay. He went in, served, and came out. The fact that keeps circling back is simple. J-Hope was never supposed to be here. Not in BTS, not on Billboard, not on that Lollapalooza stage. Every single milestone he reached was one that almost did not happen. And that's exactly what makes his presence in this group irreplaceable. Number 6. Suga. Min Yoongi did not dream of becoming a K-pop idol. He wanted to be a music producer. That distinction matters because it explains everything about who Suga is and why his role in BTS goes far deeper than what audiences see on stage. Yoongi grew up in Daegu, South Korea's fourth largest city, but a place with almost zero infrastructure for aspiring musicians in the entertainment industry. There were no big agencies scouting there, no pipeline to Seoul. If you wanted to make music in Daegu, you did it yourself or you did not do it at all. So Yoongi did it himself. By the age of 13, he was already writing lyrics and learning music production software on his own. He became part of the underground hip-hop scene in Daegu, rapping under the name Gloss. This was not K-pop training. This was raw, unfiltered, street-level hip-hop, the kind where you earn respect by the weight of your bars, not by your appearance or choreography. Yoongi's family did not support this path. His parents wanted him to focus on academics, which was the conventional, safe route in South Korean society. Choosing music meant choosing conflict at home. To fund his passion, Yoongi took on part-time jobs, scraping together enough money to buy equipment and keep producing. He was a teenager, financing his own creative career against his family's wishes in a city that offered him nothing but obstacles. When Big Hit Entertainment held auditions, Yoongi entered and was accepted as a trainee, but he joined with the understanding that he would be involved in music production, not just performance. He relocated to Seoul, leaving behind everything familiar, and entered a trainee system that was grueling by design. Trainees practiced for hours every day, with no guarantee of ever debuting. Big Hit was still a small company with limited resources, and the living conditions for trainees reflected that reality. Then came the incident that could have ended everything. During his trainee years, Yoongi was working a part-time job as a delivery rider to supplement his income. He was struck by a car. The accident caused a significant injury to his shoulder. And here is the part that reveals exactly what kind of person Min Yoongi is. He did not tell Big Hit about the injury. He was terrified that if the company found out he was physically compromised, they would cut him from the trainee program. So he hid it. He continued training, practicing choreography, performing with a shoulder that was damaged and never properly treated. He endured that pain in silence for years. The injury did not surface publicly until much later, and Yoongi eventually underwent shoulder surgery in November 2020. That means for roughly 7 years of BTS's active career, from debut through their rise to global dominance, Suga was performing on stages around the world with a shoulder that had never fully healed from a car accident he suffered as a broke trainee. Every dance practice, every concert, every award show performance was executed through a layer of physical pain that he chose not to disclose. Beyond performance, Yoongi's contribution to BTS as a producer and songwriter is staggering. He has production and writing credits across a massive portion of the group's discography. He is not a performer who occasionally contributes to songwriting. He is a full-spectrum music producer who happens to perform. In August 2016, he released his first solo mixtape under the name Auguste D, which is Suga spelled backward, combined with DT for Daegu Town, a direct stamp of his origins. The mixtape was raw, aggressive, and addressed topics like depression, social anxiety, and the pressures of fame with a bluntness that is rare in K-pop. Yoongi has been openly vocal about his struggles with mental health, breaking a significant cultural stigma in South Korea, where public discussion of psychological issues has historically been avoided. His second mixtape, D2, arrived in May 2020 and debuted at number 11 on the Billboard 200. His full solo album, D-Day, released in April 2023, debuted at number 2 on the same chart. Number 2 on the Billboard 200 for a solo artist who started producing beats alone in a bedroom in Daegu. He also expanded his production work beyond BTS, notably producing the song 8 with South Korean icon IU in 2020, which became a massive hit across Asia. In September 2023, Suga enlisted for his mandatory military service, serving as a social service agent due to his shoulder condition, and completed his service in June 2025. The through line of Min Yoongi's career is defiance. He defied his family's expectations. He defied geographic limitations. He defied a physical injury that should have disqualified him. And he defied the entire K-pop system's definition of what an idol is supposed to be by insisting on being a producer first and a performer second, then excelling at both. Number 5. Jungkook. In 2011, a 14-year-old kid from Busan named Jungkook stood on the audition stage of Superstar K, one of South Korea's biggest televised singing competitions. He did not win. He did not even make it deep into the competition. But what happened next changed the trajectory of K-pop permanently. After his audition aired, 7 entertainment agencies contacted Jungkook with casting offers. 7. That is nearly unheard of for a contestant who did not advance far in the show. These were not small companies either. Among them was JYP Entertainment, one of the 3 biggest entertainment agencies in South Korea, the company behind acts like 2PM, GOT7, and later Twice. For most aspiring idols, receiving a single offer from JYP would be the defining moment of their lives. Jungkook received that offer and turned it down. He chose Big Hit Entertainment instead. At that time, Big Hit had no proven idol group to its name. It was a small operation with limited funding, no dedicated training facility comparable to the big 3 agencies, and no guarantee of success. The reason Jungkook chose Big Hit, according to his own account, was RM. He saw Kim Namjoon during the audition process and was so impressed by his presence and ability that he decided to follow him. A 14-year-old kid chose his entire career path based on the impact one person made on him in a room. That is not a strategic industry decision. That is instinct. And it turned out to be one of the most consequential instincts in modern music history. Jungkook moved from Busan to Seoul at 15 to begin his training. He was a child, living away from his family in a city where he had no roots, training in a company that could not promise him anything. Big Hit recognized his raw potential, but also identified gaps in his skill set, particularly in dance. So they sent him to Los Angeles to train at Movement Lifestyle, a well-known dance studio in the United States. A teenage boy from Busan was flown across the Pacific Ocean to sharpen a skill that his small agency believed he would need. That investment tells you 2 things. First, Big Hit was serious about the quality of their trainees. Second, Jungkook was serious enough about his own development to train in a foreign language at an age when most teenagers are worrying about school exams. He debuted with BTS on June 13, 1913. He was 15 years old. While other kids his age were entering high school, Jungkook was stepping onto a professional stage as the youngest member of a 7-person group that the K-pop industry largely ignored. BTS's debut did not shake the industry. They were from a small agency. They had no major media backing. The group had to build their audience from the ground up through raw content and social media engagement. Jungkook grew up inside that process. His entire adolescence played out in front of cameras, on stages, in practice rooms. He did not get the luxury of making teenage mistakes in private. Every phase of his growth, physical, vocal, and emotional, was documented and broadcast. Within the group, Jungkook earned the nickname Golden Maknae, maknae being the Korean term for the youngest member of a group. The title was given lightly. He demonstrated competence in virtually everything he attempted, from singing and dancing to drawing, filming, and athletics. This versatility was not a marketing angle. It was observable and consistent across years of content. In July 2023, Jungkook released his solo single, 7, featuring American rapper Lotto. The song debuted at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, #1. Not #1 on a K-pop chart or a streaming subcategory, #1 on the most competitive music chart on the planet. He became one of the very few Korean solo artists to ever achieve that position. His solo album, Golden, followed in November 2023 and debuted at #2 on the Billboard 200. Before that, in November 2022, Jungkook performed Dreamers at the opening ceremony of the FIFA World Cup in Qatar, in front of a global television audience estimated in the hundreds of millions. A kid from Busan who did not pass the early rounds of a Korean TV singing competition was now performing on the single largest stage in international sports. In December 2023, Jungkook enlisted in the South Korean military for his mandatory service. He did not delay, he did not seek special treatment. He reported for duty like every other Korean man his age. The arc of Jungkook's story is almost uncomfortably clean in its logic. He chose the wrong company by every rational standard, followed one person's energy instead of an industry's infrastructure, and ended up exactly where no one predicted he would be, at the very top.
Number 4. Kim Taehyung was not supposed to be in BTS. He was not even supposed to audition. That single fact reshapes everything you think you know about how one of the most recognizable faces in global entertainment arrived at his position. Taehyung grew up in Gyeochang, a small rural county in South Gyeongsang Province, far removed from the entertainment hubs of Seoul or even the larger cities like Daegu. His family were farmers. This was not a household with industry connections, music tutors, or a plan to produce a pop star. The world Taehyung grew up in was agricultural, modest, and quiet. His early passion was not singing or dancing. It was the saxophone. He learned to play the instrument as a student and was genuinely focused on music in a classical and instrumental sense, not in the direction of idol performance. There was no childhood vision of standing on a K-pop stage. The saxophone was his lane, and he was content in it. The audition happened almost by accident. A friend of Taehyung's was planning to audition for Big Hit Entertainment, and Taehyung went along to support him. He was there as a companion, not a candidate. But at the audition site, reportedly on the encouragement of a Big Hit staff member who noticed him, Taehyung decided to audition as well. His friend did not pass. Taehyung did. He was, by multiple accounts, the only person accepted from that particular audition. The entire foundation of V's career in BTS rests on a spontaneous decision made at someone else's audition. If his friend had not been auditioning that day, if Taehyung had not tagged along, if that staff member had not noticed him, the group would have debuted as 6. Once Taehyung entered the Big Hit trainee system, something unusual happened. The company decided to keep his existence hidden from the public. In the lead-up to BTS's debut, the other members were being gradually introduced to audiences through blog posts, videos, and social media content. Taehyung was not. He was the last member to be revealed, earning him the label of the hidden member among early followers of the group. This was a deliberate strategic choice by Big Hit, designed to create anticipation. But for Taehyung, it meant spending months in a strange limbo where he was part of the group internally, but invisible to the outside world. When he was finally revealed, the response was immediate. Audiences were struck by his visuals, but more importantly, by his voice. Taehyung possesses a naturally deep baritone, a vocal tone that is uncommon in K-pop, where higher-pitched, brighter vocal tones have traditionally dominated. His voice did not fit the conventional mold. In any other context, that could have been a disadvantage. Within BTS, it became one of the group's most distinctive sonic signatures. His vocal color gave tracks an emotional depth and texture that a group of similar-sounding voices simply could not achieve. On BTS's 2016 album Wings, Taehyung's solo track Stigma showcased his vocal range and emotional delivery in a way that forced even skeptics to acknowledge his artistry. The song drew from neo-soul influences and placed his deep, rich tone at the center of a track that was unlike anything else in BTS's catalog at that point. It was proof that his unconventional voice was not a limitation, but an asset that expanded the group's creative boundaries. Beyond music, Taehyung moved into acting with a role in Hwarang, The Poet Warrior Youth, a Korean historical drama that aired on KBS 2 from 2016 to 2017. The role introduced him to a completely different creative discipline and demonstrated a range that extended beyond the idol framework. In January 2019, he released a self-composed song called Scenery on SoundCloud, and it shattered the platform's streaming records at the time of its release. A free, self-released track from a single BTS member broke records on a platform dominated by independent Western artists. That is not fandom alone. That is genuine cross-cultural demand for his artistry. His solo album, Layover, released in September 2023, debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 200. The album leaned into a soft, jazz-influenced R&B aesthetic that was a deliberate departure from the high-energy pop BTS is known for. Taehyung did not try to replicate the group's formula as a soloist. He built something entirely his own. In December 2023, Taehyung enlisted for mandatory military service alongside several other BTS members. The farmer's son from Gyeochang, the saxophone student who showed up to someone else's audition, the hidden member nobody was allowed to see, became one of the most visually and vocally iconic artists of his generation. None of it was planned, and maybe that's exactly why it worked.
Number 3. RM. Every empire has a cornerstone, and in BTS, that cornerstone has a name, Kim Namjoon. Before the stage name RM, before the United Nations speeches, before the Billboard records, there was a teenager in Ilsan, a satellite city northwest of Seoul, who was doing two things no one around him thought could coexist. He was ranking among the top students in his school, with an IQ reportedly tested at 148, and he was writing underground rap lyrics in notebooks his parents did not know about. Namjoon was not the typical profile of a future idol. He was an intellectual. He read philosophy, he consumed literature, and he taught himself English not through tutors or private academies, but by watching the American sitcom Friends repeatedly, with Korean subtitles, then without subtitles, then mimicking the dialogue until the language became instinct. That self-taught fluency would eventually become one of the most strategically important skills in K-pop history, but at the time it was just a kid in his room rewinding a DVD player. While still in middle school, Namjoon entered the Korean underground hip-hop scene, performing under the name Runch Randa. Underground hip-hop in South Korea is not a casual scene. It is a community built on lyrical credibility, and Namjoon earned respect in it at an age when most of his peers were focused entirely on academic rankings. His talent caught the attention of established figures in the scene, and through rapper Sleepy, Namjoon was connected to Bang Si-hyuk, the founder and producer behind Big Hit Entertainment. What happened next is the detail that most people do not fully appreciate. Bang Si-hyuk did not recruit Namjoon into an existing group. He built BTS around him. Namjoon was the first member signed, and the entire concept for the group was structured with him as its foundation. Every subsequent member was selected to complement what Namjoon had already established. Without Kim Namjoon, BTS does not exist, not in a metaphorical sense, in a literal, structural sense. The group was architecturally designed around one underground rapper from Ilsan. His parents were not supportive of this direction. Namjoon's mother reportedly cried when she learned he was pursuing music instead of academics. In a society where academic achievement is deeply tied to family honor and social mobility, choosing hip-hop over university was not just unconventional, it was, in the eyes of many Korean parents, a form of self-sabotage. Namjoon made that choice anyway. He debuted as the leader of BTS on June 13, 2013, at the age of 18. From the beginning, he carried a weight that none of the other members had to bear in the same way. He was the leader, the primary lyricist, a producer, and, because of his English fluency, the group's sole communicator with the international press. Every major interview, every Western media appearance, every critical moment where BTS needed to articulate who they were to a non-Korean speaking world, Namjoon was at the microphone. That is an enormous amount of pressure concentrated on a single person in a 7-member group. In September 2018, RM stood at the podium of the United Nations General Assembly and delivered a speech as part of UNICEF's Generation Unlimited initiative. He spoke about self-acceptance, about the pressure young people face to conform, and about finding one's own voice. A K-pop idol addressed the United Nations. The speech was not ceremonial filler. It was substantive, personal, and delivered in fluent English by a man who learned the language from a television comedy. He returned to the UN multiple times, including in-person remarks in 2022, reinforcing BTS's role not just as entertainers, but as voices in global youth advocacy. His solo work reflects the intellectual depth that has always set him apart. His mixtape, Mono, released in October 2018, debuted at number 26 on the Billboard 200. The project was introspective, melancholic, and musically experimental, drawing on ambient, lo-fi, and alternative influences that bore no resemblance to mainstream K-pop. His full solo album, Indigo, released in December 2022, debuted at number 15 on the Billboard 200 and featured collaborations with artists like Erykah Badu and Anderson .Paak, signaling a level of creative respect from Western artists that very few Korean musicians have achieved. Across BTS's entire discography, RM holds writing and production credits on a staggering number of tracks. He is not a figurehead leader. He is the creative engine that drives the group's artistic direction. He writes, he produces, he conceptualizes. The group's thematic arcs, from the School trilogy to the Love Yourself series, bear his intellectual fingerprint. He enlisted for mandatory military service in December 2023. The boy who chose rap over university, who taught himself English from a sitcom, who was told by his own family that he was making a mistake, became the leader of the most successful musical act to ever emerge from Asia. And he did it by refusing to be anything other than exactly who he was.
Number 2. Jin. Kim Seok-jin was not a singer. He was not a dancer. He was not a rapper. He had absolutely no background in any of the disciplines that define a K-pop idol. When he entered the BTS pipeline, he was an acting student at Konkuk University in Seoul, majoring in film with a plan to become an actor. Music was not part of his trajectory.
Performance, in the idol sense of the word, was nowhere in his blueprint. The way he was discovered is the kind of story that sounds engineered for drama, but is simply what happened. A casting agent from Big Hit Entertainment spotted Succes on the street near Konkuk University as he was getting off a bus. The agent approached him because of his appearance, that is it. Not because he was performing, not because he had a demo tape or a dance reel or a reputation in any musical community. A stranger saw his face and handed him an opportunity. Succes accepted and entered the Big Hit trainee system with what can only be described as a catastrophic skills deficit compared to his peers. The other trainees had been dancing for years, rapping since childhood, were singing in competitions. Succes had been studying camera angles and screenwriting. He could not dance. His vocal ability was raw and undeveloped. In an industry that treats debut readiness as a minimum standard, Succes was starting from a position so far behind that in most agencies he would have been filtered out within months. He was not filtered out, and what he did next is one of the most underappreciated feats of discipline in BTS's entire story. He learned. Not casually, not gradually. He attacked his deficiencies with a relentlessness that the other members have spoken about repeatedly. He practiced choreography for hours beyond the scheduled training sessions. He took vocal lessons and drilled technique with an intensity driven by the awareness that he was the least prepared person in the room. There was no natural head start to fall back on. Every skill Succes brought to the stage on debut day was built from nothing during the trainee period. BTS debuted on June 13, 2013, and Succes, the oldest member at 20 years old, stepped onto that stage knowing he had worked harder than almost anyone in the group just to reach a baseline. His position in BTS evolved into a vocal role, and over the years his vocal development became one of the group's most compelling internal narratives. On the 2016 album Wings, his solo track Awake was a moment of public reckoning. The lyrics addressed the feeling of watching others who are more naturally gifted and wondering whether you can ever truly keep up. It was not abstract songwriting. It was autobiography delivered through melody, and it resonated because everyone watching could see the real history behind the words. His 2018 solo track, Epiphany, from Love Yourself, Answer, became one of the most emotionally significant songs in BTS's entire catalog. The song is about self-realization and self-acceptance, and Succes delivered it with a vocal maturity that would have been unthinkable from the untrained acting student who had walked into Big Hit years earlier. The growth was not incremental, it was transformational. In October 2022, Succes released The Astronaut, a solo single co-written with Coldplay. The collaboration was not a token feature. Coldplay's Chris Martin worked directly with Succes on the track, and it charted on the Billboard Hot 100. An acting student with zero musical training co-wrote and released a charting single with one of the biggest rock bands in the world. That sentence should not make sense, and yet it is exactly what happened. In December 2022, Succes became the first BTS member to enlist in the South Korean military. As the oldest member, he was the first to face the enlistment timeline, and he entered active duty service without delay. He completed his mandatory service and was discharged in June 2024, becoming the first to finish. Following his discharge, he released his solo album Happy in November 2024, a project that reflected a lighter, more personal creative identity distinct from BTS's group sound. Within the group dynamic, Succes' role has always extended beyond music. As the eldest member, he functions as an emotional stabilizer. In Korean culture, the role of the hyung, the older brother, carries weight. It implies responsibility for the well-being of the younger members, and Succes has carried that role consistently across more than a decade. He's the member who deflects tension with humor, who absorbs pressure so others do not have to, and who held the group's emotional center steady during the most intense periods of their global rise. The fact that the oldest member of BTS, the emotional anchor, the person who holds the human infrastructure of the group together, is the one who arrived with the least preparation and the fewest tools, is not a contradiction. It is the point. Number 1. Jimin. Park Jimin does not do good enough. He never has, and that single relentless characteristic is the reason he stands at the top of this list and at the top of records that no Korean solo artist had ever touched before him. Jimin grew up in Busan and from an early age showed an aptitude for dance that went beyond casual interest. He enrolled in the Busan High School of Arts, one of the most competitive arts institutions in the country, and studied contemporary dance. Not hip-hop, not street, contemporary. This is a critical distinction because contemporary dance demands a fundamentally different kind of body control. It requires fluidity, precision, emotional expression through movement, and an understanding of form that is closer to fine art than to the percussive, rhythm-driven styles that dominate K-pop. Jimin did not just attend the program, he was the top student in his department, the best dancer in a school designed to produce the best dancers. That was his starting position before K-pop ever entered the picture. When Jimin auditioned for Big Hit Entertainment, he was accepted, but he entered the trainee system later than the other members. He was the last to join the BTS lineup, arriving in 2012, roughly a year before the group's debut in June 2013. That compressed timeline meant Jimin had to absorb everything: the group's choreography, vocal training, rap elements, variety show skills, team dynamics, in a fraction of the time the other trainees had been given. And he was doing this while simultaneously transferring from his arts high school in Busan to Korea Arts High School in Seoul. He was uprooting his entire life, changing schools, moving cities, and preparing for a professional debut all at once as a 17-year-old. What set Jimin apart from the beginning was not just talent, it was an almost punishing commitment to perfection. Multiple BTS members and staff have described his training habits in similar terms. He practiced longer than anyone. He repeated routines past the point of exhaustion. He was never satisfied with his own performance, even when everyone around him told him it was already excellent. This is not a charming personality quirk. It is a psychological driver that pushed his physical and emotional limits repeatedly throughout his career. On stage, the result of that obsession is visible in every movement. Jimin's dance style within BTS is immediately distinguishable. Where other members hit choreography with sharpness and power, Jimin adds a layer of fluidity and controlled elegance that comes directly from his contemporary dance foundation. His body isolations, his extensions, his transitions between hard and soft movement. These are not things you learn in a K-pop training room. They are the product of years of disciplined classical training layered on top of idol choreography. His solo track, Lie, from the 2016 album Wings, was a turning point. The performance was dark, theatrical, and physically demanding, featuring choreography that blended contemporary technique with emotional storytelling in a way that was genuinely new for K-pop at the time. Serendipity, the intro to 2017's Love Yourself Her, showed the opposite end of his range, soft, sensual, and vocally delicate. Filter from 2020's Map of the Soul 7 pushed further into theatrical shape-shifting, with Jimin embodying entirely different personas within a single performance. Each solo showcased a different dimension of an artist who refuses to repeat himself. Then came March 2023. Jimin released his first solo album, Face, and the lead single, Like Crazy, debuted on #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. Park Jimin became the first Korean solo artist in history to reach the #1 position on that chart. Not the first K-pop idol, the first Korean solo artist, period. That record had never been achieved before him. No soloist from the entire Korean music industry, across decades of releases and global ambitions, had ever reached that peak. Jimin did it with his debut solo album. Face itself debuted at #2 on the Billboard 200, confirming that the chart performance was not a single-driven anomaly, but a reflection of genuine album-wide demand. In July 2024, Jimin released his second solo album, Muse, and the single Who became a global phenomenon, topping the Billboard Global 200. With 2 solo albums both debuting in the top 2 of the Billboard 200 and a Hot 100 #1 to his name, Jimin established a solo commercial record that most artists in any genre, in any country, spend entire careers failing to achieve. He did it within 16 months. In December 2023, Jimin enlisted in the South Korean military for mandatory service. The perfectionist who was never satisfied with his own performance, who trained harder and longer than anyone around him, who came in last to the group and ended up setting records that none of his peers had set individually, reported to duty like everyone else. The reason Jimin sits at #1 on this list is not because of a single record or a single performance. It is because of the pattern. Every phase of his career follows the same logic. Enter at a disadvantage, outwork every variable, and leave with results that rewrite what anyone thought was possible. That is not luck. That is not timing. That is the arithmetic of someone who decided early that good enough was never going to be part of his vocabulary.